Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. There's a small lamp burning in the corner of a quiet room, and the only sound is the gentle scratch of a pencil on paper. Outside, the night is deep and unhurried, and somewhere in the darkness a seed is splitting open beneath the soil, silently preparing to rise. That's how creativity works in the stillness, in the unseen hours, in the spaces no one claps for. It's not the sudden burst of brilliance people imagine. It's quiet, humble borrowing and reshaping, a kind of soulful gathering of fragments until they make something new, something yours. That's what Austin Kleon wants you to remember. He's not the kind of author who shouts from a mountaintop about genius and originality. His voice is gentle but firm. The voice of someone who has walked through the insecurities, the blank pages, the doubt, and found a way to turn all of it into a practice. A poet, a visual artist, a chronic note-taker of life, Kleon lives in that space where words meet images, where stories meet sketches, and where inspiration meets the everyday. He doesn't talk about art as a precious, unreachable thing. He talks about it like it's a cup of coffee, a shared smile, a song stuck in your head, small, ordinary, and yet endlessly full of possibility. His message is a reminder that you don't have to wait for lightning to strike. You just have to start gathering sparks. And the first truth he shares is disarmingly simple. Nothing is original. At first, it sounds almost like a loss. Doesn't the world need original thinkers, never-before-seen ideas, fresh visions? But sit with it for a moment and it becomes a kind of liberation. If nothing is truly original, then you don't have to be some mythical genius creating from thin air. You can start where you are, with what you love, with what's already out there. Think of your favorite song. Chances are it's built on chords someone else played decades ago. Think of a movie that made you cry. Its themes are probably as old as humanity. The beauty is that the creator wove those elements together in a way only they could. That's the invitation. Steal like an artist. Not theft in the cold legal sense, but a warm kind of gathering. You take what moves you, what sparks something in you, and you make it your own. You filter it through your voice, your hands, your eyes, your life. You, who are listening right now, have already been doing this without even realizing it. The books you've read, the conversations you've had, the films and images and faces you've stored in your mind, they're all threads you can weave into something that carries your fingerprint. Kleon urges us to stop pretending we're starting from a blank page. We're standing on a mountain of influences, and that's a gift. There's a tenderness in this truth because it removes the weight of perfection. If your work can be built from what you love, then your job is not to create out of nothing, but to pay attention to notice the lines in an old photograph, the phrasing in a friend's story, the color of the sky right before it rains. These are your tools. Another heartbeat in his message is this: follow your curiosity, not your grand vision, not the 5-year plan, not the list of shoulds you've been handed. Curiosity is quieter than ambition, but more faithful. It pulls you toward the next small thing without demanding you know the destination. Kleon paints curiosity like a trail of breadcrumbs. You follow one, then another, not because you know where it leads, but because something in you says, this is worth noticing. And before you realize it, those crumbs have led you into a place where your work feels alive. The danger is in ignoring that pull, in dismissing it because it doesn't look serious or productive. But the truth is, the most beautiful work often comes from those side trails. Many of the artists we admire, from David Bowie to Steve Jobs, were led not by rigid goals, but by a relentless willingness to explore the odd corners that caught their attention. They stole from 1,000 different places, piecing together something that became unmistakably theirs. Think of it like a mosaic. You're not expected to manufacture every tile. You're the one who chooses the colors, the shapes, the arrangement. That's where your art lives, in the arrangement. There's a story I remember, small but luminous. I was sitting on a train, watching a stranger across the aisle. She was sketching in a little notebook, her hair falling into her face, the world outside the window blurring past. The sketch itself was nothing extraordinary. A row of houses, a few trees, a cat on a fence. But there was a softness in the way she drew, like she was pulling those houses out of some place she loved. And in that moment, I realized art isn't about impressing anyone. It's about the quiet joy of capturing what moves you, no matter how small. That's what stealing like an artist feels like, not taking for gain, but for love. And maybe that's the core shift this book is whispering to you. You already have permission. Permission to gather ideas. Permission to follow what fascinates you. Permission to make without waiting for perfect conditions. You don't need to know everything before you begin. You begin, and the knowing comes in pieces. The truth is, creativity isn't born from a perfect plan. It's born from showing up. Kleon speaks of this with the ease of someone who has learned it the hard way, through the steady rhythm of doing the work, not in a rush, not in a blaze, but in the quiet persistence of a daily practice. The world will try to convince you that the leap matters more than the steps, but the steps are where the magic hides. He reminds us that every artist, no matter how great, began in obscurity, in the shadows where nobody was watching, where there was no applause to measure progress. That's why one of his soft but vital lessons is to start before you're ready. You, sitting there with the idea that's been knocking on your heart for months or maybe years, don't need more research or better tools or the right moment. The right moment is already here, in your hands, in whatever scraps of time and energy you can gather. Start with what you have and where you are. If you wait until everything feels certain, you'll wait forever. And when you do start, you'll discover something unexpected. The act of making will teach you more than thinking about making ever could. The brush in your hand, the camera in your grip, the pen moving across paper, these are teachers in their own right. They will guide you toward your voice in ways your mind alone never can. But there's a deeper current running through Kleon's work, the idea that your voice isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you grow into, something that changes as you do. He tells us to embrace influence, not as a threat, but as a mirror. Look closely at the things and people who inspire you. Study them not to copy their exact steps, but to understand the language they speak, the choices they make, the way they solve problems. Then translate that language into your own dialect. This is where the concept of stealing becomes something almost sacred. It's about learning the grammar of your heroes so you can write your own sentences. Consider Picasso, who famously said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." He didn't mean theft without transformation. He meant absorbing what you love so deeply that it becomes a natural part of your own expression. Think about how the Beatles blended American rock and roll, Indian instrumentation, and English pop sensibilities to create something the world had never quite heard before. They didn't hide their influences. They alchemized them. That's what Kleon urges you to do. And yet, in this process, there's a trap. The fear of not being original enough. But the more you create, the more you'll see that originality is not about being untouched by the world. It's about being touched by it in 1,000 ways and letting those touches shape what you make. You're not building a fortress to keep other voices out. You're building a garden where they can mingle, cross-pollinate, and give rise to something new. There's another invitation hidden in these pages to show your work, even when it feels half-formed, even when it's imperfect. Because sharing is part of the making. When you share, you create connections, you invite conversation, and you open the door for unexpected collaborations. Don't wait until you've built the masterpiece to let others in. Let them see the sketches, the drafts, the little experiments. Those glimpses are not weakness. They are bridges. Someone out there needs to see the stage you're in right now. You never know who will be inspired simply because you dared to be seen in the middle, not just at the end. And perhaps the most human reminder of all, don't isolate yourself in the name of art. Surround yourself with people who lift you, challenge you, and make you want to keep going. Build a creative family, whether it's one close friend or a whole community. The lone genius is a myth. The real work is nourished in connection. Let the people who inspire you into your orbit, even from afar. Read their words, listen to their music, watch their talks, study their choices. Then add your note to the chorus. You, who are listening right now, have a place in that chorus. You don't need to be the loudest or the most skilled. You just need to sing your part, the part only you can sing. There comes a moment, somewhere in the middle of the creative journey, when the initial spark fades and the work feels heavier than it did before. The excitement that carried you through the early days gives way to doubt, fatigue, maybe even the question, why am I doing this at all? Kleon understands this dip, and he doesn't try to paint over it with false cheer. Instead, he invites you to recognize it as a natural part of the process. This is where persistence becomes your ally, not the hard, teeth-gritted kind, but the gentle persistence of showing up anyway. Think of it like tending a plant that hasn't yet bloomed. Some days you water it and see nothing change, but beneath the soil, roots are strengthening, weaving into the earth. Your work is like that. The days when it feels still are the days when something unseen is taking shape. And here's where a surprising idea comes and limitation can be a gift. We tend to think that more freedom, more resources, more options will automatically lead to better work. But Kleon reminds us that constraints, whether in time, materials, or circumstances, can sharpen creativity instead of dulling it. When you have less, you're forced to be inventive. You start finding new uses for old tools, discovering beauty in what you already have, and uncovering solutions you would never have found in abundance. It's the same reason so many great songs have been written with only 3 chords. Limitation focuses the mind. There's also a deep humility in accepting that your work will never be perfect, and that's exactly why it's worth doing. Perfection is a moving target. Chasing it can freeze you in place. Instead, aim for sincerity. Let the rough edges show. Let the human handprints remain visible. They're what make your work feel alive. This is where Kleon's advice becomes more than just artistic, it becomes personal. He speaks of keeping a swipe file, a collection of everything that inspires you. Lines from books, snippets of conversation, photos, colors, patterns, anything that makes your pulse quicken. These fragments are the raw materials you'll return to when you feel empty. They're proof that inspiration is not a mystical force, but something you can gather and store, like seeds for a future season. And in that gathering, you'll start to notice patterns, certain themes, images, or moods that keep calling to you. Follow them. They're clues to the kind of work you're meant to make. The truth is, the work changes you. It shapes the way you see the world, trains your attention to linger on details others might miss. You start living in a state of openness, aware that anything, a child's laugh, a streetlight on wet pavement, the smell of bread baking might be the beginning of something. This way of living makes your art richer, but it also makes your life richer. It's as if you begin carrying a second heartbeat, one attuned to the rhythm of noticing. And in the midst of all this, there will be moments when you look at someone else's work and feel the sting of comparison. Kleon doesn't tell you to ignore it, he tells you to use it. Let admiration pull you forward, not push you down. Study what moves you in their work and see what it reveals about your own. Remember that you can't see their behind the scenes. You're comparing your raw footage to their highlight reel. Turn that energy inward. Ask yourself what you can make today with what you have. Little by little, you'll realize that the comparison fades when you're busy building. The beauty of stealing like an artist is that it frees you from the impossible task of being untouched. It lets you be part of a lineage, a conversation that began long before you and will continue long after. Your job is not to be the beginning or the end, but to be a vital note in the song. And if you stay with it long enough, you'll see how your note blends with others, creating something you could never have made alone. Kleon also speaks to the truth that creativity isn't something you turn on only when you feel inspired. It's a practice. Like breathing or walking, it's something you nurture daily, even in small ways. Some days that might mean filling a page with messy lines or jotting down a handful of strange, half-formed ideas. Other days it might be organizing your space, tidying your tools, or simply sitting quietly in the presence of your work. These acts are not wasted. They're the slow weaving of a relationship with your craft, a reminder to yourself that you're here, that this matters, even when the world is noisy and impatient. And in that practice, Kleon urges you to keep your day job not because your art isn't worthy, but because stability can give you the freedom to create without desperation. Too often, we romanticize the starving artist, the one who sacrifices everything for their work. But scarcity doesn't always fuel creativity. Sometimes it crushes it. When you remove the pressure for your art to pay every bill, you give it room to breathe, to grow in its own time. That job, that routine, can become the scaffolding on which your creative life quietly builds itself. There's also something grounding about keeping a piece of your life separate from your art. It keeps you connected to the world, to people, to conversations and experiences you might miss if you were locked away chasing a single vision. Those connections become the compost for your ideas, the lived moments you'll later draw from when you sit down to make something. Kleon's voice, throughout, is one of gentle realism. He doesn't promise an endless stream of joy or a straight path to success. He reminds you that there will be seasons, times when everything flows, and times when you feel dry. Both are part of the work, and when you hit those dry spells, it's not a sign to quit, but a sign to feed yourself again. Return to your influences, refill your swipe file, go for walks, watch films, listen to music that stirs something in you. Don't confuse stillness with failure. He also emphasizes the value of anonymity, especially early on. There's a kind of freedom in making when no one's watching. You can experiment, fail, and try again without the weight of expectation. The spotlight is alluring, but it can also distort. When you work unseen, your only audience is yourself, and that's when you can take the risks that lead to real growth. Over time, as you share more of your work, you may find your voice shifting. That's natural. You're not meant to stay the same. Every project changes you. Every influence leaves a trace. Your work is not a fixed monument. It's a living thing, evolving as you do. And that's why Kleon's mantra that nothing is original becomes so comforting. It means you're allowed to be a beginner, over and over again. You're allowed to learn from those who came before, to let their voices mingle with yours, to create something that's a blend of what you've loved and what you've lived. You, listening right now, might be carrying an idea that feels too small, too unformed, too borrowed. But maybe that's exactly where you're supposed to start. Maybe all it needs is for you to begin shaping it, trusting that in the process it will grow into something you couldn't have planned. And as you keep shaping it, something remarkable happens. You start to see that the act of creating is not just about the work itself, but about the person you become through it. Every sketch, every draft, every experiment teaches you not only how to make, but how to notice, how to listen, how to be present. Kleon weaves this truth into his guidance so gently that you almost don't notice at first that art is as much about paying attention as it is about producing. When you move through the world with the eyes of a maker, you start to see potential everywhere. A fragment of overheard conversation becomes a story. The way sunlight hits a chipped mug becomes a painting. The rhythm of footsteps on a rainy street becomes the beginning of a poem. This way of seeing is not something you need to earn. It's something you need to remember you already have. It's the way children see, curious, open, without the constant voice of judgment whispering, "Is this good enough?" Kleon urges you to protect that way of seeing by staying curious, playful, and willing to try. And trying means failing sometimes. But failure, in his view, isn't a verdict, it's a step. Every great work you admire carries within it the shadow of earlier failures, missteps, and abandoned attempts. Those ghosts are not shameful. They're necessary. Without them, the final piece would never have been born. That's why he invites you to keep what he calls a logbook, not just of successes, but of your process. A record of what you tried, what worked, what didn't, what you noticed. Over time, this log becomes a map, showing you where you've been and how you've grown. And growth isn't always visible in the moment. It's like watching yourself in a mirror. Every day you don't see the change until one day you do. In this journey, there's a rhythm of inhale and exhale. The inhale is when you gather, when you read, watch, listen, and absorb. The exhale is when you make, when you put out into the world your own blend of what you've taken in. You can't stay in either phase forever. Too much inhaling, and you become bloated with ideas you never use. Too much exhaling, and you run dry. The balance between the two is where creativity stays alive. And through all of it, Kleon encourages you to embrace the smallness of beginnings. Start with a corner of a bigger vision. Start with a sentence, a sketch, a single frame. You don't need the whole picture before you take the first step. In fact, the whole picture will probably change as you move forward. There's a quiet relief in this knowing you don't have to have it all figured out to begin. You only need to begin. You, who are listening right now, may feel the ache of waiting for permission, for clarity, for a sign. But maybe this is the sign. Not a lightning bolt, but a gentle nudge. A voice saying, start here with what you have and let the rest unfold. And as you start here with what you have, you may find that the act of making begins to change your relationship with the world. You stop thinking of creativity as a distant mountain to climb and begin to see it as a constant stream you can step into at any time. It's there in the scraps of paper on your desk, in the photos you've saved on your phone, in the songs that pull you back to a memory you didn't know you needed. Kleon's way of speaking about this is almost like a reminder to breathe. You don't force it, you just allow it. He knows how easy it is to become paralyzed by the idea that what you're making must be important, significant, groundbreaking. That weight can crush the impulse before it has a chance to grow. So he asks you to lower the stakes. Make something small. Make something playful. Make something for the sheer act of making. Sometimes that tiny creation will lead to something bigger, and sometimes it will simply exist, beautiful in its smallness. Either way, it matters, because it keeps you moving. Movement is life for the creative spirit. Stillness, the wrong kind of stillness, is where ideas go to wither. That's why he encourages rituals. Not grand ceremonies, but little touchstones that signal to your mind and body it's time to make. Maybe it's a cup of tea, a certain playlist, the way you set your desk before you start. These rituals become anchors in the shifting waters of life, a way to return to your creative self no matter what storms are passing through. And storms will come. There will be days when everything you make feels hollow, when you question if you have anything worth saying. Kleon's answer to that is not to retreat into silence, but to keep making, even if only in small bursts. Those moments are like keeping a fire alive with a few glowing embers they'll catch again when the conditions are right. Somewhere in the middle of the book, there's a kind of emotional pause, a moment where his voice softens, acknowledging that for many of us, the biggest barrier is not lack of ideas or talent, but fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of being judged. Fear of not being enough. And he meets that fear with compassion. He doesn't tell you to banish it, because fear has a way of hiding in the corners when you try to chase it out. Instead, he invites you to make space for it, but not to let it drive. It can sit in the room while you work, but it doesn't get to hold the pen. This is where he slips in one of those mantras that's worth carrying with you. Do good work and share it with people. Not perfect work, not world-changing work. Just good work, honest, sincere, yours. And share it, because someone, somewhere, might need it in ways you can't imagine. You, who are listening right now, might be surprised by how deeply your smallest offering could matter to someone else. And when you begin to share, something shifts. The work no longer lives only in your own mind. It becomes part of a larger conversation. Kleon reminds you that this doesn't mean chasing validation or bending yourself to please an audience. Sharing isn't about proving your worth. It's about connection. It's about letting your ideas, your images, your words find the people who will understand them in their own quiet way. Sometimes that connection will be loud and visible, with praise or recognition. Other times it will be silent, someone reading your words in the middle of the night, someone carrying an image you made in the back of their mind for years, without ever telling you. Both matter. Both mean the work has traveled further than you could alone. But sharing also means being open to influence, not only from those you admire, but from those who respond to your work. Their perspectives can nudge you in new directions, push you to explore corners you hadn't considered. You don't have to accept every suggestion or critique, but staying open keeps the conversation alive. That's how art breathes. Kleon is also clear that protecting your space, physical, mental, emotional, is part of protecting your creativity. The modern world is loud, filled with distractions designed to pull your attention away from the slow, patient work of making. He suggests carving out a space that belongs to your creative self, even if it's just a small table or a specific hour each day. In that space, you give yourself permission to step out of the noise. This isn't about isolation. It's about creating a sanctuary where you can hear your own voice more clearly. And as you build that sanctuary, you might notice something beautiful. The more you practice, the more the world starts to feel like a library you can borrow from endlessly. Every person, every place, every story becomes a potential page in your own unfolding book. This is the heart of stealing, like an artist not taking to deplete, but taking to plant. You borrow seeds from the world and grow them in your own garden. They will never bloom exactly as they did where you found them, and that's the point. You give them your soil, your light, your weather, and they become something entirely new. Alongside this, Kleon offers a gentle warning about the myth of overnight success. We see the final product, the breakthrough, the moment in the spotlight, and we forget the years of unseen work that came before. He reminds you to focus on the long game, to think of your creative life not as a single race, but as a lifelong practice. The moments of recognition will come and go, but the daily act of making is what sustains you. And in those days, especially the quiet ones, keep returning to the mantra: do good work and share it with people. It's enough. It has always been enough. And when you think of it that way, as adding your verse to a song that's been sung for centuries, the pressure shifts. You're no longer trying to be the only one, the first, the final word. You're simply joining a chorus, carrying your note as far as you can, trusting that someone else will pick it up when you're done. Kleon makes it clear that this is not a lowering of ambition, it's a deepening of purpose. Because when you create in this way, you're connected to something bigger than your own ego. You're part of a lineage of makers, dreamers, and storytellers who have been borrowing from and building on each other's work for as long as we've existed. And in this shared space, generosity matters. Give credit when you can. Acknowledge your influences. Share the sources that inspired you. This openness not only honors those who came before, but also invites others into the same chain of influence, encouraging them to find their own voice within it. It's a reminder that inspiration is not a finite resource, it grows when it's passed along. Still, Kleon knows the world we're making in is not always kind. The internet can magnify comparison, criticism, and the temptation to measure your worth by likes and shares. That's why he insists on holding something back, not in a stingy way, but in a way that protects your creative core. Keep a part of your process, your world, that belongs only to you. Not everything has to be shared. Some pieces are meant to be yours alone, private gardens that feed you without ever being on display. This is how you keep the work sacred. This is how you avoid burning out in a world that demands constant output. Alongside this, he talks about longevity, the idea that building a sustainable creative life is less about short bursts of brilliance and more about steady, almost stubborn continuation. Think of artists like Patti Smith, who has allowed her work to grow and shift over decades, never trapped by one version of herself. Or someone like Hayao Miyazaki, whose films are layered with influences from literature, history, and daily life, and yet unmistakably his own. These figures didn't arrive fully formed. They stayed in motion, adapting, taking in, giving out. They kept stealing like artists, not just once, but for a lifetime. And maybe that's the quiet, radical truth at the heart of Kleon's message. Creativity is not a singular act. It's a way of moving through the world. It's a way of noticing, of connecting, of weaving yourself into the ongoing tapestry of human expression. You don't have to do it all today. You don't have to see the whole design. You just have to keep adding your threads. You who are listening right now are already part of it, whether you realize it or not. The choice is simply whether you'll add your thread with intention, with love, with the courage to let it be imperfect. And when you add your thread with intention, something tender but powerful begins to happen. You start to trust the process itself. You stop asking, will this be good enough? Before you've even begun. And instead, you lean into the act of making as its own reward. That trust is a kind of quiet strength. It's what keeps you going through the invisible seasons, the ones where you plant but do not yet see the bloom. Kleon invites you to see those seasons as sacred, because they are when you're building the roots that will hold you steady later. And when the blooms do come, they will carry traces of everything you've borrowed, learned, and loved along the way. He knows that part of what holds us back is the belief that we need more time, more skill, more clarity before we can create something worth sharing. But the truth is, you learn those things by doing the work, not before. It's in the mess, the revisions, the false starts that your real voice begins to emerge. And that voice will always be a work in progress, not a flaw, but a sign of life. Think about how musicians tour an album. They may play the same songs night after night, but each performance is slightly different, shaped by the energy of the room, the mood of the day, the way their hands fall on the strings. Your creative work is like that too, never exactly the same twice, always evolving in small, unseen ways. That's why Kleon urges you to treat your creative life like a long conversation, not a single announcement. Conversations have pauses, tangents, moments of listening as well as speaking. They unfold over time, and their meaning often deepens in hindsight. The same is true of your work. Some pieces will reveal their importance only years after you've made them. Some ideas will take root in someone else's mind and return to you in a form you never expected. This is the beauty of being part of the creative ecosystem. What you put out there takes on a life beyond your control, and that's not something to fear. It's something to celebrate. In the end, Kleon's message is both freeing and grounding. You don't have to invent the universe. You just have to pay attention to it, borrow from it, remix it, and give something back. That cycle, take, transform, return is the heartbeat of creativity. And as long as you keep that heartbeat alive, you are doing the work. You who are listening right now might feel the stirrings of something you've been meaning to make, a small idea that's been waiting for you. Let this be your invitation. Begin with one borrowed spark. Shape it with your hands, your mind, your heart. Then let it go into the world, where it will become part of someone else's spark. And when it comes back to you, it will be changed, carrying traces of the journey it's taken. That's how the song keeps playing. That's how we keep making. And if this message has lit something in you, even a small ember, I invite you to keep that ember alive. Share this with someone who might need the reminder. Leave a thought, a feeling, or a story in the comments so we can keep this conversation going. Like, subscribe, and join in so that together we can keep building this circle of sparks, this ongoing exchange of light. Because every time you share, you're adding another thread to the tapestry. And that tapestry is bigger, more beautiful, and more alive because you are in it.